A notorious LA gang leader described by police as a thrill killer is headed for death row at San Quentin.
You are sentenced to death.
35-year-old Timothy McGee, seen smiling and laughing during the sentencing hearing, was convicted in October of 2007 of killing two gang rivals and a woman. One of the victims was shot 28 times. McGee also opened fire on police officers during an ambush, but they weren't hurt. Prosecutors say he even boasted in rap lyrics about the pleasure he got from killing.
Los Angeles has had its share of monsters, but few were as feared as Timothy Joseph McGee, better known as the Monster of Atwater. The Los Angeles Times listed him among California's top 20 most notorious killers, allegedly tied to a dozen murders and suspected in 10 more attempted killings.
There was room for only one widow in Atwater village. That was the sole reason that he executed Ryan Gonzalez.
His fear factor stretched far beyond Atwater Village. Even hip-hop couldn't dodge his madness because in just one night, he reportedly opened fire on Kurupt and Daz Dillinger and even ended up killing Big U's brother. He was a true menace. Let's dive in. Born on April 27, 1973, Timothy Tim McGee grew up right in the thick of East LA's gang world. His dad, a Scottish guy, left early, so McGee leaned completely into the Mexican-American side of his identity and the streets that shaped him. By the time he was coming up, he had already picked up two nicknames that stuck: Huro for his lighter skin and Eskimo. And he wasn't just drifting around the edges of gang life, he was fully inside it. As a teenager, he was already repping Tuner V, Refa 13, TVR 13, and not quietly either. He built a reputation fast as somebody who was fearless, unpredictable, and absolutely not someone you wanted to cross.
35-year-old Timothy McGee, seen smiling and laughing during the sentencing hearing, was convicted in October of 2007 of killing two gang rivals and a woman. One of the victims was shot 28 times.
The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney Hoon Chun, laid out the story piece by piece.
McGee's road to infamy started way too early, and it only got darker from there. At just 16 years old back in 1989, he pulled the trigger on a shotgun into a crowd, seriously injuring a man. That one move landed him in juvenile detention, but instead of slowing him down, it lit a fuse that would define his violent legacy. By 1993, trouble came knocking again. This time, McGee was arrested for assaulting a police officer.
Timothy McGee was evil, egotistical, sociopathic,
No remorse, totally callous, and extremely cruel.
He wasn't afraid of authority, he challenged it. Each arrest just made his name echo louder on the streets, building the legend of a man who didn't fear anyone or anything. But it was the mid to late 90s when McGee truly evolved, from a regular gang hitter to one of the most feared figures in Los Angeles street history. His reputation turned vicious. In 1997, everything went completely off the rails.
McGee also opened fire on police officers during an ambush, but they weren't hurt.
One wild chase had him hunting two rival gang members, Juan and Pedro, through Atwater like they were prey. Juan ended up paralyzed from the waist down, and McGee almost took Pedro's life after unloading bullets into a car he thought was bulletproof. He wasn't guessing, he was determined. That same year, he committed one of his coldest murders ever. His target?
McGee always felt that he was an aspiring rapper. He was always writing.
A lot of them had to do with the killings that he did.
Ronnie, a member of the Frogtown Reefers. McGee made him strip off his shirt to expose his tattoos, basically forcing him to prove his gang ties, and then, with zero hesitation, fired 28 rounds straight into him. It was ruthless, calculated, and showed just how far gone he was from any sense of mercy or control.
He was a 5-star psychopathic killer.
He killed for sport. He enjoyed doing, it was a high for him to go out and kill somebody.
By the year 2000, McGee's story took a pitch-black turn, darker than ever before. He wasn't just after rival gang members anymore, he was striking at anyone who crossed his path. That year, he allegedly shot and killed a 17-year-old high school student, Marty Robles Jr., who was just sketching by the LA River. The kid wasn't involved in anything. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and McGee showed no hesitation. Right after that, he reportedly executed a homeless man nearby, thinking the man had seen too much. And then, with that same blank stare that people said made their blood run cold, he turned to his homie and said he was hungry and wanted food. No remorse, no emotion, just another day for him. McGee didn't run Tunerville 13 like a typical gang. He ran it like a paramilitary unit. His crew had to do group workouts, follow strict drills, and constantly practice shooting. The neighborhood was basically locked down. Armed guards posted at every corner, radios buzzing, eyes on every car that rolled through. They even set up checkpoints, calling in any movement that looked suspicious. And McGee, he was always one step ahead. He used police scanners to track law enforcement in real time, predicting their next move before they even hit the block.
He was killed by a guy named Timothy Joseph McGee, aka the Monster of Atwater. Daz was the bodyguard for Kurupt at the time, and he was shot and killed in 1999 outside a music studio in LA.
On July 4th, he went full tactical, ordering his guys to dump trash in the streets to slow down a police patrol car. When the officers pulled up, McGee's crew opened fire, turning a holiday night into pure chaos. From 2000 into 2001, his violence exploded. It wasn't just gang beef anymore. It was urban warfare. In June 2000, he even murdered 16-year-old Ryan Gonzalez over something unbelievably petty. The two shared the same street nickname, Wheel, also known as Hero. But in McGee's mind, there could only be one, so he made sure Gonzalez never used that name again. Later that same year, McGee's rage hit a whole new level. He went straight after the cops. This wasn't random street chaos anymore. It was a planned ambush.
He killed for sport. He enjoyed doing it. It was a high for him to go out and kill somebody.
He reportedly set up LAPD officers by luring them deep into Tunerville territory, where his gunmen were waiting. The second those patrol cars rolled in, bullets started flying. McGee wanted to make a statement. No one was untouchable, but nothing, absolutely nothing, was darker than what happened on August 8, 2001. That date became burned into Los Angeles history as the Whitkus family massacre. It was the moment McGee's name turned into a symbol of pure terror. According to investigators, McGee stormed into Cherry Whitkus's home believing she had snitched on his drug business. What followed was beyond brutal. It was a total slaughter. Cherry, her mother, and even a neighbor who was just visiting were all murdered in cold blood.
Buddy.
According to the coroner, he was shot 26 separate times.
Now that's a whole different level of cold callousness.
None of them had anything to do with gangs or crime. They were just innocent people caught in the path of McGee's paranoia and blind fury. And as if that horror wasn't enough, McGee went even further. 2 days later, he killed again. This time, it was someone from his own circle. He allegedly turned on his close friend, Christina Duran, a woman he trusted. It was supposed to be her birthday, but instead of celebrating, she became his next target. Police said she had spoken to investigators, and McGee wasn't taking chances. Instead of laying low, he executed her. 5 shots to the head. That cold, calculated betrayal is what made him truly terrifying. A man with no limits, no loyalty, and no line he wouldn't cross. What made McGee stand out wasn't just his violence. It was how his brutality bled beyond the gang world and tore through the lives of people who had nothing to do with street politics.
The person with the bicycle threw the bicycle into the street. The police car then had to swerve around that.
And that's where the gunfire ensued.
No one was safe. Not families, not friends, not bystanders. His wrath didn't care about sides or reasons. It was chaos with a pulse. When detectives finally cracked deeper into his world, they uncovered notebooks written in McGee's own hand, and what they found was chilling. Page after page was filled with gangster rap lyrics, bragging about his kills, mocking witness protection, and taunting anyone brave enough to testify. In those lyrics, he wrote cold promises that rats won't make it to the stand. It was proof he didn't just see himself as a gangster, he saw himself as untouchable, almost like a movie villain, a man who thought he was living his own legend. At the same time, this dark era was colliding with the LA rap scene, where the line between street life and music fame was razor thin.
Yeah, because they say the shooters allegedly, their first story was they came through on the bikes, so they was thinking some Rough Rider stuff.
Atwater Village, where most of this madness went down, was a strange slice of Los Angeles, wedged between the LA River and Glendale, quiet and low-key. The kind of neighborhood people pass by without a second glance. It wasn't South Central, and it didn't look like a gang war zone. But by 1999, Atwater Village belonged entirely to Toonerville Reefer 13. Under McGee's control, TVR 13 wasn't just another neighborhood crew. It was being transformed into a disciplined, militarized operation, structured, organized, and deadly efficient. But soon, the music world collided head-on with that danger. On the night of October 17th, around 11:40 p.m., a recording session had just wrapped up. The energy was chill. Kurupt had just finished dropping a verse, Daz Dillinger was still hanging around running the session, and two other Death Row affiliates were there too. Javon Tharelis Jones, known for sounding just like Tupac, and Willard Act a Fool Givens. The night started with beats and verses. But before long, it was about to turn into something no one in that studio would ever forget.
The U.S. Marshals, LAPD put together a task force dedicated to finding McGee.
He was one of our most wanted individuals.
Watching over everyone that night was 23-year-old Dwayne Draws Dupree, a respected street figure who knew how to move smart, always calm, always alert. His job was simple: keep the peace and make sure everyone walked out safe. The vibe was chill, the session had wrapped, and the crew stepped outside to the patio for a smoke break. Nobody thought twice about danger. It wasn't South Central, and Atwater Village felt like neutral ground, with major names from the industry around. Who would dare start anything, right? But that illusion shattered in seconds. From the dark street, two shadowy figures stepped out, quiet, deliberate, moving with purpose. They didn't say a word, didn't flash a sign, didn't ask, "Where you from?" This wasn't a confrontation, it was an ambush.
A notorious LA gang leader described by police as a thrill killer is headed for death row at San Quentin.
You are sentenced to death.
Without warning, the shooters lifted high-powered rifles, most likely AK-47s, and opened fire. The sound ripped through the night, a storm of bullets slicing through the patio. The calm smoke break turned into a war zone in seconds. Kurupt and Daz reacted on pure instinct, diving behind planners and studio gear as rounds cracked through the air. Bullets hit so close, bits of concrete exploded right next to them. The noise was deafening, chaos everywhere, bodies hitting the ground, shouts, confusion. It was survival mode. By some miracle, Kurupt and Daz made it out without a single bullet wound. But Tharelis wasn't so lucky. A shot hit him in the foot, dropping him hard. And Act a Fool got struck in the calf, hitting the floor instantly. The patio was a mess. Smoke, blood, and silence broken only by the echo of gunfire fading into the night.
He leads a riot.
He was running a tier of jail cells.
He starts yelling for other inmates to attack the guards. He starts telling them to throw things at the guards. At one point, he's even telling them to break the porcelain sinks in their cell so they can get makeshift weapons.
But the real heartbreak that night was what happened to Dwayne Draws Dupree. As the group's protector, he didn't hesitate. He stood right in the line of fire. When the shooters opened up, bullets ripped through his upper body, hitting him multiple times. Still trying to hold his ground, Draws collapsed on the cold concrete, bleeding heavily while the attackers kept firing. It was relentless. No mercy, no pause. When their magazines finally emptied, the gunmen didn't stick around. They melted back into the shadows of Atwater Village, disappearing as quietly as they had come. The whole ambush lasted barely a minute, but the damage was beyond repair. Moments later, LAPD patrols flooded the scene. The studio patio was pure chaos. Shell casings everywhere, shattered glass glinting under red and blue lights, and people crying out in shock and pain. The screams mixed with sirens, and that once chill studio night was now a crime scene soaked in tragedy. Paramedics rushed in, doing everything they could, but for 23-year-old Dwayne Draws Dupree, it was too late. He was pronounced dead right there on the concrete, the same spot where he'd stood guard to protect everyone else. The loss hit hard. He died doing exactly what he was known for, holding it down for the crew. At first, both the media and police got the story twisted. They thought the shooting was connected to Kurupt's diss record, the one where he called out DMX and The Firm. And honestly, given the tense climate of late 90s and early 2000s hip-hop, That theory made sense. It was an era when rap beefs could explode into real violence overnight. But that early theory about a rap beef, it fell apart fast. Once investigators started digging deeper, all signs pointed straight to Timothy Joseph McGee. The real motive wasn't about music, lyrics, or fame. It was pure street-level violence, soaked in paranoia and control. Detectives soon realized this ambush fit McGee's pattern perfectly. It wasn't some industry dispute, it was about territory and dominance. They suspected the attack was rooted in territorial protection, maybe even racial tension. To McGee, a group of mostly black men hanging out late at night inside Toonerville's turf could have looked like outsiders stepping where they didn't belong. When you mix that mindset with his reputation for random, unprovoked violence and his obsession with treating Atwater Village like a military zone, everything about the shooting started to make sense. In McGee's twisted view, he wasn't just defending his space, he was enforcing it. The tragedy of Dwayne "Draws" Dupree's death hit even harder when the truth surfaced about who he was connected to. His brother, Eugene "Big U" Henley Jr. That name alone carries major weight in Los Angeles. Big U is known citywide as one of the most powerful figures tied to the Rollin' 60 neighborhood Crips, one of LA's strongest and most respected street alliances. And standing on the opposite end of that spectrum was Timothy McGee, the ruthless shot caller of Tuner Villarifa 13, a hardcore Sereno gang rooted deep in Mexican-American street culture. So when Dupree was killed, it wasn't just a murder. It was the collision of two massive forces, Black Crip power versus Latino Sereno power. The streets buzzed with talk about what could come next. People feared it might explode into something way bigger. But here's the shocking twist. McGee probably had no clue who he'd actually killed. He wasn't sending a message to Big U, and he wasn't trying to ignite a racial or gang war. For him, it was just another act of control, another night of violence. In McGee's mind, anyone on his turf without permission was a target. McGee's violence was wildly unpredictable, completely ruled by his own twisted sense of logic. There were no rules, no boundaries, just chaos. Dwayne "Draws" Dupree wasn't targeted for who he was. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time under the control of the wrong man. By 2002, McGee's rampage had spiraled so far out of control that law enforcement finally locked in. The LAPD teamed up with federal agents to create a massive multi-agency task force with one goal: bring down the monster of Atwater. But catching McGee was no easy job. He was constantly on the move, bouncing from Los Angeles to Las Vegas and even slipping through Arizona's back roads. Every time investigators thought they had him cornered, he'd vanish again like smoke. He wasn't just hiding, he was living like a ghost, and his body count kept rising. Then came the biggest twist of all. TV took him down. In February 2003, McGee's face aired on America's Most Wanted in the same episode as the Elizabeth Smart case. Millions of people were watching across the country, and one of those viewers was living in Bullhead City, Arizona. That person recognized a quiet guy staying in a nearby mobile home. A man who didn't talk much, kept to himself, but looked exactly like the monster on TV. Without hesitation, they picked up the phone and made the call. The tip went straight to the task force. Less than 24 hours later, on February 12, 2003, a SWAT team rolled in, surrounding the mobile home and locking down the area. They were ready for war, fully expecting McGee to come out guns blazing, the same way he'd lived for years. The air was tense, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. This was the final showdown everyone had been waiting for. The SWAT team was geared up for war. They expected a barricade standoff, maybe even a bloody shootout, something explosive and violent, just like McGee's reputation. But when the door finally opened, the unthinkable happened. Timothy McGee didn't come out swinging. He walked out calm and quiet, hands raised, no fight at all. What truly chilled the officers wasn't the peaceful surrender, it was his shirt. McGee was wearing a custom-made t-shirt that read, "Fugitive can't see me," like he was mocking the entire system, even in the moment of his capture. Even after they cuffed him, McGee didn't act like a man about to spend life behind bars. He smirked at the cops, that cold grin stretching across his face like he was in on some private joke. To him, it wasn't over, it was entertainment. That same arrogant smile never faded, becoming part of his identity, a mask he wore with pride through the next 5 long years while waiting for his trial. When court finally began in 2007, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like a horror movie playing out in real life. The atmosphere was thick with fear. Even hardened officers could feel the tension crawling through the room. Witnesses had to be escorted by armed guards, slipping in and out under heavy protection. Some shook so badly they could barely speak. One witness, completely overcome with panic, collapsed mid-testimony, gasping and trembling until they had to stop the trial to get help. Another witness, a man McGee had previously paralyzed from the waist down, was brought in to testify. When his moment came, he looked McGee dead in the eyes, froze, and then said he couldn't remember who shot him anymore. The fear in that room was real. Nobody wanted to be the next target. And through all of it, McGee just sat at the defense table, relaxed, smirking like he owned the place. He even smiled at the victims' families, like their pain actually amused him. That haunting grin said it all. He wasn't sorry, he was proud. McGee sat there in court with that same smug grin, staring down the prosecutors like they were wasting his time. To him, the entire trial wasn't justice. It was a small delay, something blocking him from fully becoming the myth he thought he'd created. Even with his life on the line, he looked like a man sitting through a boring meeting instead of facing a lifetime in prison. The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney Ho Chun, came in prepared for battle. Chun broke the story down piece by piece, connecting McGee to every key killing. The murder of 16-year-old Ryan Gonzalez, the execution of Ronnie Martin, and the high-profile slaying of Dwayne "Draws" Dupree. Each case was tied back to McGee with chilling precision. Then, to drive the point home, the prosecution brought out McGee's own words. His notebooks and rap lyrics became evidence, pages bragging about murders, mocking witness protection, and threatening anyone who dare testify. It was like McGee had written his own confession in rhyme. Chun didn't hold back. He painted McGee not as just another street soldier who lost control, but as a cold, damaged man who killed for power. Someone who got a rush out of playing God on the streets. The case looked airtight, the evidence stacked, the narrative strong. It should have been an easy conviction. But then, everything flipped inside that jury room. During deliberations, one juror, identified only as Juror X, refused to agree with the majority. She didn't buy what the prosecution was selling, not entirely. She questioned the witnesses, calling out how many of them were gang members, addicts, or people with motives to cooperate just to save themselves. Her doubts shook the room. The tension exploded behind those closed doors. What looked like a clean win for the prosecution suddenly became a fight for belief, trust, and truth. And McGee, sitting there with that same eerie smile, seemed to love every second of it. Juror X's doubts lit up the jury room like a fuse. Her refusal to fall in line drove the other jurors crazy. They said she wasn't deliberating in good faith, that she was holding up justice. The tension got so bad that Judge Robert Perry made a massive call, one that would haunt the case for decades. He removed Juror X and replaced her with an alternate juror. The moment that switch happened, the tone changed completely. Within hours, the new jury reached a unanimous decision. They found Timothy McGee guilty of 3 murders, including the killing of Dwayne "Draws" Dupree. Their recommendation? Death. Just like that, McGee's fate was sealed. He was sent off to San Quentin State Prison, the same fortress that's housed some of the most dangerous men in America. The so-called monster of Atwater was finally locked away, sentenced to die. For nearly 20 years, McGee sat on death row, buried under extreme security conditions, isolated from the world outside. But he didn't stay quiet. In 2005, he got caught up in a violent prison riot, showing once again that his taste for chaos hadn't faded. The incident earned him another 75 years to life, stacked on top of his death sentence. Even behind bars, McGee couldn't escape himself. Then, out of nowhere, April 2025 dropped a bombshell. The California Supreme Court reviewed McGee's case, and the justices unanimously overturned all of his murder convictions. But here's the kicker. It wasn't because he was proven innocent or because someone else came forward. The evidence didn't suddenly crumble, and there was no hidden confession. The reversal came down to something technical but powerful, a procedural violation tied to that dismissed juror, Juror X. After 2 decades of being branded one of California's most feared killers, McGee's entire conviction was wiped clean on a legal technicality. The system that once buried him had just cracked open a door, and the world couldn't believe what it was seeing. The California Supreme Court's ruling flipped everything upside down. They decided that juror number 5, the one known as Juror X, had every right to be skeptical. Her doubts weren't wild or baseless, they were reasonable. And when you look closer, it's easy to see why. A huge part of the prosecution's case had leaned on witnesses who were gang members, drug users, or people desperate to cut deals with the police. In gang-related cases, there's always a heavy code of silence, layers of fear, intimidation, and loyalty that twist the truth depending on who's asking the questions. That juror wasn't being difficult. She was refusing to blindly trust shaky testimony. And according to the court, removing her violated McGee's right to a fair and impartial jury. So just like that, the convictions were tossed. The headline hit like a shockwave across California. The monster of Atwater's murder convictions overturned. But here's the catch. It didn't mean freedom. Even with those murder convictions gone, McGee's not walking out anytime soon. He's still serving multiple consecutive life sentences, including that extra 75 years to life he earned after the brutal 2005 San Quentin riot. No parole, no early release. He's locked down for life. After everything, the chaos, the fear, the bloodshed, Timothy McGee remains trapped behind concrete walls, his legend sealed in the darkest chapters of Los Angeles history. If you found this story as wild and shocking as it gets, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more unbelievable true crime breakdowns. And don't forget to share this story, because the world needs to know how deep the madness really went.